A thought dump on the Buffalo Bills coming out of free agency and into draft mode is coming your way today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Well, folks, welcome in. This is going to be a very random episode where we're going to be all over the place. And my intent is really to just give you a big thought dump. The things that are on my mind about the Buffalo Bills coming out of free agency, right? The big waves of free agency have come and gone, and into draft mode, right? The next big team building opportunity in the offseason. And so I have 10 things down, 10 different thoughts that I want to share with you about where this team is at. And it's going to be very broad in terms of the range of things that we will cover today. So let's have some fun here on this Friday episode of Locked On Bills. The first one that I have down is that the primary needs for the Bills could not be more obvious. You know exactly what positions this team needs to address: corner, defensive tackle, defensive end. There's other things: tight end 3, maybe a field stretcher at receiver, some depth at linebacker, maybe some depth at safety. But what this team really has to get between now and when it's time to play football games is help at corner, defensive tackle, and edge. Corner is obvious. Right now, your penciled-in starter across from Christian Benford is a competition between Dane Jackson and Jamarcus Ingram. Those are perfectly fine depth players. They should not be anybody's preferred starters. And so that's obviously something that needs to be addressed. Defensive tackle. Even with the Larry Ogunjobi suspension, the Bills need help at defensive tackle. You only have Dwayne Carter and Ed Oliver signed beyond this season. And whether it's a nose tackle or another guy that can really rush, you need it. And then off the edge, Joey Bosa, AJ Epinesa, expiring contracts, Michael Hoyt, 6-game suspension. You need some cost control players that will provide impact. And so when you look at this Bills team that's entering this draft with 10 draft picks, pick 30, pick 56, and pick 60, right? Those are the early picks that the Bills have. A corner, a D tackle, and an edge. Now, it's not something that you want to just absolutely say you have to come out of those 3 picks with those 3 needs filled. But it's pretty obvious what the Bills need to accomplish. There's a lot of different ways they can get it done. You know, they could take the corner first, then the edge, then the D tackle, right? There's a lot of different ways to do it. But the primary needs for this team could not be more obvious. So that's number one. Number 2, and this gets me excited. The offensive continuity is real. And that's nice for a change. Thinking about the offense, whether it's been from Dayball to Dorsey, to Joe Brady in his first year as the full-time OC last year, right? You've had a lot of OC turnover. Last year, the Bills pretty much replaced their entire receiving core. Khalil Shakir, the only one that had ever played with Josh Allen in a game prior to the season. It's a very different situation this year. So you're going in with the same coordinator and Joe Brady. That's not his first year anymore. Your entire offensive line is back. Every offensive lineman that you rostered last year is back. Your entire running back room that you rostered last year is back. Your top 2 tight ends are back. And of course, your wide receiver room has a little turnover. Amari Cooper, a midseason addition, he's not back. Mac Hollins is a Patriot, but you bring in Josh Palmer, not nearly what the Bills did last year with pretty much gutting the room and rebuilding it. And so, Josh Allen coming off of an MVP season with a lot of stability, a lot of continuity around him in every imaginable way, no small deal. I mean, even like the quarterback's coach, Ronald Curry, not his first year on the job this year. So there's a lot to be excited about when you consider how good this Bills offense was last year, the most prolific scoring offense the Bills have ever put on the field. Over 30 points per game on average they scored. Top 3 in every efficiency metric you want to look at. It's nice to consider what this can look like in 2025 with continuity that really hasn't been there on the offensive side of the football. And I feel like a lot of the shortcomings of the offense last year were chemistry related. Vertical passing offense. Not really on the same page with Dalton Kincaid consistently enough. Well, those things should be a lot better this year. I mean, you're basically just trying to work in Josh Palmer, and everything else is pretty much the same. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Number 3, and I got 10 things, so this will be the third one. I'm pretty excited for the shift at special teams coordinator. And mostly that it's an experienced coach in Chris Tabor taking over. Chris Tabor has a terrific resume, but 13 years as a head special teams coordinator in the NFL. 3 as an assistant. I mean, 16 years coaching special teams, 13 of them as a lead special teams coordinator. Very different than the last 2 hires that Sean McDermott made at special teams coordinator. Heath Farwell and Matthew Smiley, both, it was their first year ever as a lead special teams coordinator. Now you have a guy stepping in that has 13 years. And Sean McDermott, when he was asked about this at the Combine, he compared it to when they hired Aaron Cromer for the offensive line. And that it was an experienced coach. And Sean's given a lot of young coaches that have not really had a ton of experience, given them opportunities to be position coaches and even coordinators, right? That's absolutely happened. And sometimes that's worked, sometimes it hasn't. But for this special team situation to have 2 first ever guys in the job and to see how it went, it probably was time for some experience, just like an offensive line where it was Bobby Johnson, never was a lead O-line coach prior to coming to Buffalo. And I think Juan Castillo was the other one, Juan Castillo, and he was never really an offensive line coach prior. He's like a D-line coach, and now he's the O-line coach. So I feel like it was the right idea to get a coach with some experience, and certainly you get a heck of a resume in Chris Tabor. Also, I kind of like that Chris Tabor is coming into this season after a year off. Not a bad year to take a year off if you're a special teams coordinator, while all the rest of the league is losing sleep at night over the new kickoff rule. You got a chance to just watch that from a bird's eye view. You didn't have to go be in the weeds with it. You let everyone else kind of figure it out, and you can observe from afar, and now it's time to go implement what you think is going to work. So I like that dynamic. So my first 3, and these are not necessarily ranked in any order of importance, but just literally a thought dump of 10 things that I wrote down. The primary needs could not be more obvious. The offensive continuity is real, and I'm excited for an experienced special teams coordinator. All right, I've got 3 more that I'm going to break down for you on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need an extra hand for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. You can find the right talent. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. It's a very fast and easy process. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you'll have multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Plus, it's cost effective. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. So visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. The insights are surprising. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. The convenience is awesome. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Plus, it's easy to collaborate. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, folks, let's continue with this post-free agency, pre-draft thought dump on the Buffalo Bills. Items 4, 5, and 6 coming your way right now. Number 4, safety Darrick Forrest, one of the Bills' free agent additions, has me very curious. I think you can look at a lot of the other additions, Palmer, Bosa, Hoyt, Ogunjobi, and you know exactly kind of what the vision would be for them and the role that they'll fill, et cetera, et cetera. Forrest is one of those guys that comes in on a minimum deal and just has me really intrigued. And I think that's for 2 reasons. Number 1 is who Forrest is. Player that I tracked very closely at Cincinnati. Cincinnati, when I was with my previous employer, Cincinnati was part of my responsibility. And I was dialed into that program, and I was excited about a lot of their talent. And Darrick Forrest is one of those players. Good size, good athleticism, plays a really fast and urgent brand of football, versatile. I think he can really fill any role. There's a lot to like about who Darrick Forrest is, and certainly in his 1 year as a starter in Washington, he played at a pretty high level. And then it's also Sean McDermott's resume, which is off the charts with safety. And obviously Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are the big examples in Buffalo, but in Carolina, it was Mike Mitchell and Kurt Coleman. And you go back to Philadelphia and guys like Quentin Michael. Just felt like whoever he got his hands on, Trey Boston, it didn't matter. That he was able to really get a lot out of these safeties. And there's just something about the marriage of who Forrest is and kind of his path, the day 3 pick. Didn't get a big deal, 1-year contract. Got a year to start, but then, new regime comes in. He kind of gets phased out. Just kind of feels like that next guy, right? And I think he's got a challenging path because I keep saying this. I think the Bills want their safety tandem to be Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop. But Forrest might have something to say about that. And so I'm curious to see how he onboards and, what type of opportunity he can command. And I think we've learned through the years, that at some point everyone's going to get their chance, right? Jamarcus Ingram, Cam Lewis, Dane Jackson started like 28 games in 4 seasons, never was the preferred starter. DeMar Hamlin, you're going to get your chance. Ryan Vandermark got his chance. You're going to get your chance. What does Darrick Forrest do with it when it comes? I'm excited to find out. He's got me real curious. Number 5, when is the Connor McGovern extension coming? We're talking about James Cook or Christian Benford. The one that always felt kind of easy to me was Connor McGovern because, 2 years with the team. He's been a good player. I thought he had a great season at center. Feels like he really meshes well with the O-line room, meshes well with Josh Allen. It feels like it was a very successful signing, not only for the 1 year at left guard, but probably even more for the transition to center and moving away from Mitch Morse. Like, I keep saying this as well. Connor McGovern really proved the Bills right about what they did with their offensive line going into 2024. Feels like this would be a player you want to keep around. Not only that, you can create cap space by extending him. And looking at the center market, I mean, Creed Humphrey's the top dog at $18 million a year. But Drew Dahlman, who's a pretty good player, I mean, he signed a free agent deal with the Bears at $14 million a season. Lloyd Cushenberry last year signed a free agent deal with Tennessee at $12.5 million a year. I'm curious to see where McGovern falls. I would guess somewhere between 12 and 15 million a season. And I feel like the Bills are going to be willing to give him that. And so I'm just kind of wondering, when's that one coming? Because that one feels like a deal that would have a lot of momentum to happen. And I'm not saying there's any concerns. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen during camp. It could happen, the 3 days before the season starts. We've seen after the draft, like we've seen all this stuff happen. But McGovern's one to add to the list. Like if you're thinking about James Cook and Christian Benford, we'll talk about them in a little bit. I'd encourage you to also think about Connor McGovern because I feel like that one's very likely. Number 6, Osiris Torrance is going to be expensive to extend. And, obviously we're a year away from that conversation. He's been in the league. He's played 2 seasons, right? So you're extension eligible after your 3rd season. So that has to happen. But Osiris Torrance has come in and been a good player. I wouldn't say he's been an elite player or anything like that. I think he's been a good starting guard. But the NFL appears quite eager to pay good young starting guards. There are now 14 guards in the NFL making north of $15 million a season. Robert Hunt last year got $20 million a year from Carolina. Aaron Banks, who's been a pretty good guard for the 49ers, got 19 and a quarter per season from Green Bay. Will Fries just signed with the Vikings, who, even had injuries last year. He's been a kind of a small sample size of high-level play, $17.5 million a year. If Osiris Torrance is exactly who he's been and maybe takes a step, even a modest step forward, he's positioning himself to be one of these north of $15 million a year guards. And so I think you have to ask yourself questions about, can you pay all of your offensive linemen? Because you're paying Brown, you're paying Dawkins, you're probably going to be paying McGovern. Is Osiris Torrance a player that is destined to kind of play out his rookie contract and be a player that walks? It'll come down to priorities for him. And I think, obviously, the Bills, who knows what those dynamics are in 2 years. And I do think the Bills have a lot of intriguing interior offensive line depth. But just generally speaking, Osiris Torrance is probably going to be a very expensive player to keep, just based on where that guard market is heading and who's getting these deals. Osiris Torrance has a lot more upside than a guy like Aaron Banks. And so that's one I'm kind of buckling up for because I'm very curious to see how the Bills handle that one. Or is it inevitable that after 2 more seasons as a starter, he probably walks? You could see it. But we'll see what those dynamics are at the time. But the point being here, Osiris Torrance is going to be expensive to extend. So this little trio of thoughts, Darrick Forrest has me very curious. When is that Connor McGovern extension coming? And Osiris Torrance is going to be expensive to extend. All right, I got 4 more items to break down for you on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, folks, 4 more thoughts about the Buffalo Bills coming out of free agency and into draft mode. And I'm excited about draft mode. Next week, get ready. We're talking prospects. We're talking corners. I'll probably have multiple shows breaking down these top corner prospects, letting you know how I feel about them. Plan on doing the same for edge, D-tackle, probably some receivers, and then, of course, any player the Bills bring in for a visit. The draft conversations are starting next week. So if you're ready to talk draft, it's coming. Number 7, Amari Cooper and Rasul Douglas are not high priorities for the NFL. Now, these were, I guess, the Bills' 2 most notable expiring contracts. Neither one's been signed, and I don't feel like there's been a lot of movement on either front. And, they're both on the wrong side of 30, and I think they both had major decline last season. I thought it was pretty evident in their tape. But what surprised me is it didn't matter what outlet put out, their top 100 NFL free agents. These guys were ranked high, like top 25 for a lot of lists out there from, whatever, The Athletic, Pro Football Focus, CBS, all these different places that do this stuff. Those are pretty highly ranked guys. And neither one has a deal. And there's plenty of teams that need receivers and corners. They're probably going to be guys that sign after the draft, right? Like you kind of look at the landscape of the league and maybe a team wasn't able to fill a hole or whatever, and you call these guys up. But there's really not been any movement there. And those were like the Bills' 2 quote unquote big ticket free agents. And I feel pretty validated for my tone towards those players as like starters that were expiring contracts that, most of the conversations and projections had Cooper and Douglas as guys that could be $12 to $15 million a year in their next deal. And it doesn't feel like the league is super eager to sign either one at this point in time. Number 8, the Bills have quite a few levers to pull for cap space. I think the Bills are pretty tight on cap right now. We haven't really been able to see an accurate number to this point, based on all the extensions, cap savings moves, cuts, players they brought in. I don't know where the Bills are at cap wise. I think it's probably pretty close to 0. But they still have plenty of levers to pull. In terms of restructures, they've only restructured at Oliver that we know of. They can restructure for Deion Dawkins for $9.8 million. They can restructure Dawson Knox for $6.2 million. They can restructure Taron Johnson for $3.3 million. Not to mention you can extend Connor McGovern and get cap savings. Like all of that's still possible. And so, they're going to need operating funds for during the season. And you don't want to pull every lever, right? But I think the Bills are pretty tight on cap, but I think they could very quickly get about $20 million if they needed it or they wanted it. So still plenty of levers left to pull to create cap space. Number 9, Christian Benford and James Cook. This is where we'll talk about them. I think it's pretty clear that neither player is settling. I think they have a valuation of themselves that is different than what the Bills are willing to commit to. And when I think about players that have extended early with the Bills, right? These players are both under contract for 2024 or 2025. But the early extensions have all been very team-friendly. Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir, very team-friendly extensions. I'd even say Greg Rousseau was team-friendly. Spencer Brown was unbelievably team-friendly. Ed Oliver, I know he didn't have the year that we wanted him to last year, but he signed that deal. And then that next season, if that was the year he had going into free agency, you think Milton Williams got the bag? Ed Oliver would have got the bag too. And so I feel like there's a trend between early extensions and the fact that they're team friendly. And I think Christian Benford and James Cook are potentially telling us that there's a gap between where they value themselves and where the Bills are willing to come in money-wise. Brandon Beane said as much for James Cook. he said we're not on the same page. Christian Benford, he didn't give us as much detail, but we know that there's been conversations and we know that there's not a deal done. Well, okay, there's things to iron out. I'm really hopeful that Christian Benford will sign an extension. And boy, I mean, you saw what Derek Stingley got. You saw what J.C. Horn got. Sauce Gardner, Trent McDuffie, also guys that are ready for extensions as well. So it would behoove the Bills to get it done, but Christian Benford also has to agree to it. And he's aware of the situation. And so if money's the number one priority for those players, which I think it definitely is for James Cook, I'm kind of curious to see where these ultimately land. And then the last one that I have, number 10, is kind of bringing things back to this idea that we have entered, and I think this really started last year. We have entered the next chapter of the Josh Allen era. Yeah, you think about the roster transition last year and then the additions to the roster in last offseason. Things have kind of ramped up even more this year. I thought last year was very much a foundational year for that next chapter. We've seen Brandon Beane do more in free agency this year than in a while. And he's loaded with draft capital, 10 picks, including a first, 2 2s, 2 4s, multiple 5s, multiple 6s. The Bills are, for a team that's not picking until 30, they got a lot of draft capital. And so you want to talk about continuing to write this next chapter. You know, there's still more to come. There's still more to come to make this next era, right? The next chapter in the Josh Allen era. Plenty of opportunity for it to be better than the one that already happened. And I think it started in a great way. Josh Allen was the NFL MVP in a year that the Bills were pretty much written off. And then they go take the Chiefs to the brink in the AFC Championship game with not a good defense. The Bills, not a good defense. And so I think this team should be pretty self-aware of what they have and what they need. And I think they have to an extent so far. But this next chapter is still being written. And I think we're in the infancy stages of it, right? I mean, we were kind of started it last year, and this is year 2 of the next era. And it's kind of cool to see how it's kind of built back up and, you know, got a new nucleus of guys, Shakir, Bernard. You know, it's taken form a little bit here. And I'm excited to see how it continues to evolve. So the last chunk of thoughts, Amari Cooper and Rasul Douglas aren't priorities for the NFL. The Bills still have levers to pull for cap space. Benford and Cook are not settling. And the Bills are still writing that next chapter of the Josh Allen era. Hope you enjoyed. A lot of random thoughts, but I was just kind of calibrating my own mind as I start to think more and more about draft. And I thought it was a good opportunity to just kind of put a bunch of stuff out there to give us some level of closure for the major waves of free agency and really set the tone for our draft conversations, which start next week. Barring major news over the weekend, we're talking corners on Monday. And so I'm excited to start breaking those down for you. Don't miss anything. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day, folks. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.